Hi everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Kickstart Your Real Estate Investing. In this week's episode, I'm in Cancun, the beautiful city of Cancun, and I'm in a resort enjoying myself with my family, and I just felt, hey, this would be a good way to start this episode and talk about real estate investing. Cancun, as you know, is a great tourist spot and it is also one of the best places to have an Airbnb. So if you're looking at investing, you should look at Cancun. If nothing else, enjoy your vacations in Cancun. So now let's get back to the show and I'll talk more about pre-closing there. Thank you. Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Kickstart Your Real Estate Investing. In this week's episode, we're going to go to the next step, which is after you finish your due diligence process, after the appraisal is done, you're getting close to closing. But before closing, there is something called as a phase, which you might call it the pre-closing phase. And that's very important because you're going to carry out certain activities which are going to be very important for your closing and how you manage your rental going forward, right? So there are three most important things you have to think about when you start thinking about pre-closing, as in when you're getting ready to close your particular investment property you're buying, okay? The very first thing you need to start thinking about is the lender. Like, what is the lender you're going to go with? Who is it you're going to go and buy your particular loan with? Remember, the lender who basically gave you a pre-approval letter at the very beginning may not be the lender you might want to close with. Why? Because by the time the pre-approval letter was given, the interest rates were different, the market was different. And now when you're getting close to closing, the interest rate might have changed. So what you want to do here is go and make sure that you're choosing the right lender on which you're going to go and close. Now, how do you go about choosing the lender? It's always going to come down to what loan product you're buying. If you're getting a good rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage, go for it, because your goal is to have a predictable, consistent payment for your loan which is going out without any fluctuation of the market affecting it. And a fixed loan for a 30-year is a perfect vehicle for that. Now, many times you might also get an ARM product, so you might choose an ARM product which might have a lower introductory rate, which might work well for you in the short term. And then later on, you can graduate into a fixed loan, right? So choosing the lender becomes very important. One other aspect to think about is if the lender gives you something called as discount points. So what that means is if the market rate is, let's say, 7%, and the lender is able to say, okay, for $2,000 more, I can bring your rate down to 6%. And then you can do an analysis, like a more of a break-even analysis, to understand if by paying $2,000 upfront, is it going to save me more money in the long term? So if you plan to hold a property for 5 years, 10 years or more, it is always going to be more beneficial to pay the discount point upfront and reduce your rate. Okay, so you need to start thinking about all those things, keep all those things in mind, and finally, you will have to choose one lender who you can bring to the closing table, who can fund the remaining 80% of your loan by the 20% down payment you're making. Okay, so that's the number one thing you have to keep in mind. The most important thing, you want to make sure you choose the right lender. The second most important thing is choosing the insurance provider. Remember, now you're going to buy a rental property, you need to buy some insurance on it. And almost all vendors will expect that you have some insurance on it, because by default, you want to make sure that if anything happens to that property, they are covered. Okay, and in this, there's not much to decide here. The main thing we want to see is what can give you the most amount of liability on a particular coverage, right? So you might think that you're buying a $300,000 home, and if you get a liability insurance which covers for like personal injury and liability insurance for, let's say, $300,000, you're good. But you might want to take that a more higher limit on that, maybe $500,000, maybe even $1 million. Because what can happen is that if you don't have that kind of coverage and something happens in the rental property, your tenant slips and falls, or due to some negligence, the flooring is not in the right place or something goes wrong there, and you get sued for it, you want to make sure that you have good liability coverage here to cover any accidents which can happen where you might be held liable. Okay, so keep that in mind. Buying a good liability insurance on your rental property is very important. Do not skimp on it. Do not try to reduce it down. You might pay a few dollars more on the premium, but that's one of the most important things you have to look for when you look for your insurance provider who can provide you a good insurance policy on a rental. And remember, when you take this particular policy, you have to mention that you're buying it for renting it out. So they might have some tenant specific clauses which they will add. So you do not hide that, you let them know, and they might even add rent protection and things in it, like if your tenant leaves and if your house is empty without being any rent coming in, there could be a rental reimbursement from there too. So keep that in mind when you go looking for insurance property. Let them insurance policy, let them know that you are going to be running it as a rental unit, and what you want is something which can cover the rental side of it and have a good liability insurance on top of it. And the third and the most important thing you also have to think about is, what are some of the things you need to prepare for in terms of handyman, or if you're going to make sure that you're painting the whole house, that you have a painter there. If you have some kind of a backyard you want to create, or if you want some landscaping to be improved, that you have a landscaping company or a person who can do it lined up. And the reason for doing it now is because many times all these folks are really booked like 6-8 weeks ahead of time. So you need to make sure that by the time your property closes and before you rent it out, you want to spend the least amount of time to get all these things work done, right? You might want to paint your house. You might also want to fix some things. You might want to put some blinds in there, some curtain rods, whatever your work is remaining, what you need to do to make your rental property in a good shape before you can rent it. Start lining all those people up now. So make a list of all the things you want to go ahead and get fixed, and start calling, getting quotes and getting them ready and lined up, that right after the day of closing, these folks can come in and do it. In one of my rentals, I actually had the people lined up on the day of the closing. So the closing was at 11 a.m. I had people lined up to come at 1 p.m. onwards and start working on things. So you don't want to lose time, because the whole premise here is that the sooner the house is ready, the sooner you can rent it out, the sooner it can start paying off all your expenses. Okay, so folks, these are the three main things you have to look for. 1, choose the right lender. 2, make sure you get a good insurance policy which covers a good liability insurance coverage on it. And 3, line up all your handyman, landscapers, people who are going to paint the house, anything which needs fixing and getting your particular property ready for rental. You need to get everything planned and ready for it. Okay, hope this episode was helpful to you. Please go ahead and like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next week. Bye.